You know, one of my favorite books in all the Bible, it's one of the smallest, only has 25 verses, one chapter. It's entitled Philemon. It's an incredible story of Paul, who wrote this letter to a wealthy person by the name of Philemon, who lived in Colossae. And it's all about a former employee of Philemon's, a contractual worker, a servant, who had broken his contract and fled away and ripped him off and ran to the bright lights of the big city of Rome. Paul was in prison for preaching the gospel, and irony of ironies, he got into prison with this same guy that ripped Philemon off. His name was Onesimus. Paul leads him to faith in Christ. Now, Paul writes a letter back to Philemon, and he was going to ask Philemon to forgive Onesimus and receive him back, no longer as a slave, but as a dear brother. And so the whole book is a case study in how we can relate to each other in positive and powerful and productive ways. And the first thing we see is the importance of affirmation of one another. You know, a pat on the back. It's one of the most amazing motivational factors I've ever seen. Every kid needs to know mom and dad believe in them. Every student needs to know the teacher believes in him. Every athlete needs to know the coach believes in him. And you know, you look at the most successful coaches, for example, they're the ones who affirm their players, who let them know that actually they believe in him. It's one of the greatest motivating factors in the world, is a simple pat on the back. So Paul writes this letter to Philemon, and one of the first things he says in the first paragraph in verse 7, before he ever talks about Onesimus, before he ever asks him to come back, he says this. He says, "Your love, Philemon, has given me great hope and encouragement, because you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the saints." Now, how do you think Philemon felt when he got that letter from Paul? And he said, Paul reaches out and gives him a pat on the back. He said, "Man, your love's given me great hope and encouragement. You've refreshed the hearts of the saints." But if I get a letter and right in the big beginning of it, somebody's giving me a pat on the back like that, I sit up straight in the chair and look forward to reading the rest of the letter. Affirmation is vital. You know, it was the 1960s, a long time ago. I was in high school. The 60s, I always felt sorry for people that didn't get to be teenagers in the 60s. Days of rolled and pleated seat covers and glass-packed mufflers and bass Weegians and Madras windbreakers and high school English. We had two people in our high school taught English. One was Miss Ava White. She was the hardest teacher in the school. Not Mrs., not Ms., Miss Ava White. She had devoted her whole life to teaching kids the finer techniques of English literature and grammar. And the other was Coach Seeley. He was one of the football coaches. He couldn't conjugate a verb. He didn't know anything. He didn't know anything about English. Easiest teacher in the school. Well, it came time to get classes, and all my buddies drew Coach Seeley, and I got Miss Ava White. I rocked through her class a while, and one day after several weeks, she said, "I want to see you after class." And I didn't know what it meant. I assumed she had caught me doing something, was going to send me to the principal's office. All the other kids left, and I went up to her desk. And she looked me in the face. She said, "Son," she said, "you've got character. And if you would apply yourself in here, you're rocking along making C's. If you'd apply yourself, you could make A's." I couldn't believe it. Miss Ava White believed in me. I started going up there after school and meeting with her a couple of times a week. She taught me how to think analytically. She taught me how to outline. She did. I've written a lot of books, prepared thousands of sermons. I've never outlined a sermon or outlined a book. I didn't thank God for Miss Ava White, because she changed the way I thought about myself with one simple little pat on the back. Affirmation is the most important thing you can do. Somebody in your sphere of influence needs to be affirmed today. Maybe it's your kid. Maybe it's your husband or your wife. Maybe it's somebody here at the office that you work with. Affirmation is so vital, and this is what Jesus did. He just went around affirming people. He met a woman taken in adultery one time, hadn't heard a word of affirmation in a long time. He said, "Look, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more." He met a woman at a well one time that had to draw water in the middle of the day, who hadn't had anybody give her a pat on the back. He told her of living water changed the way she thought about herself. She brought her whole village to Christ. And on the cross, he reached out to the thief on his cross with a pat on the back. Today, you're going to be with me in paradise. This is what Christ did. And as his followers, this is one of the most dynamic principles of Christian living, that we reach out today, find somebody you know, give them a pat on the back today. It may, like Ms. Ava White did for me, change the way they think about themselves.